I'm Braden, 34, and I've always valued my independence more than anything. For 6 years, my small Seattle apartment was my sanctuary, my space, my rules. Then came that Sunday dinner when my parents casually announced, "Your sister will move into your apartment next week." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just nodded and picked at my food while inside a plan was already forming. They had no idea that by the time they'd help Amber pack, I would be long gone. If you're watching this video, let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button to follow along with how I turned a family betrayal into the best decision of my life. My life before everything changed was comfortable, if not extraordinary. I worked as a software developer at Cascade Tech, a mid-sized company in downtown Seattle. I wasn't saving the world, but I enjoyed my work, my colleagues respected me, and I earned enough to live well. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted industrial building in Capitol Hill. It wasn't huge, just one bedroom with exposed brick walls, tall windows, and hardwood floors that creaked slightly when you walked across them at night. I had decorated it carefully over the years. A modern sectional sofa I had saved for months, to buy bookshelves filled with programming books and science fiction novels, and a desk setup that would make any tech enthusiast jealous. The kitchen was small but functional, with a breakfast bar where I ate most of my meals while watching YouTube videos or catching up on work. This place was more than just walls and furniture to me. It was the first space that had ever been truly mine. Growing up, I shared a room with my brother until he left for college. Even in college, I had roommates to save on expenses. This apartment represented my independence, a physical manifestation of the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. My relationship with my family wasn't terrible, but it wasn't particularly close either. We maintained what I would call a cordial distance. Holiday gatherings, occasional Sunday dinners, and the mandatory birthday calls. My parents, Robert and Diane, lived in a suburban neighborhood about 30 minutes outside the city. They were the kind of people who valued family above all else, which sounds admirable, until you realize their definition of family meant constant availability and unquestioning compliance with their wishes. Then there was my sister Amber. At 29, she was 5 years younger than me and had always been the family hurricane. Beautiful, charismatic, and absolutely reckless with her life choices. She had been married and divorced twice by 30, each relationship ending in financial disaster. Her first husband was a musician who convinced her to fund his studio. The second was a startup entrepreneur who needed investors for his revolutionary app idea. Both men disappeared along with thousands of dollars of her money. But Amber never seemed to face the consequences of her decisions. There was always someone to bail her out, usually our parents. And when they couldn't or wouldn't, the responsibility somehow fell to me. The time she needed $2,000 to avoid eviction. The 6 months she borrowed my car after hers was repossessed. The countless job recommendations I had to make calling in favors from colleagues only for her to quit within weeks because the work was stifling her creative energy. Over the years, I had tried to establish boundaries. I started saying no to financial requests. I limited how often I would drop everything to help with her latest crisis. I even tried having honest conversations about my frustrations, but these attempts were always met with accusations of being selfish or not understanding how family works. The frequency of family emergencies had increased over the past year. Mom needed help setting up her new phone. Dad needed assistance, disputing a credit card charge. Amber needed a ride from a bar at 2 in the morning because her date turned out to be a total creep. Each incident was presented as if refusing would be an act of family treason. The pressure to be more involved in family matters grew more intense after my grandmother passed away last year. Her death seemed to trigger a renewed emphasis on family togetherness led primarily by my mother. Sunday dinners became more frequent. Family group texts buzzed constantly. There was a new expectation that I would simply be available whenever needed. I struggled with the guilt of wanting distance. Was I being selfish? Was it wrong to want my own life separate from the constant demands of my family? These questions nagged at me, especially late at night when I lay awake replaying conversations and wondering if I was the problem. What made this timing particularly frustrating was that I had just received a promotion at work, senior software architect, with a substantial salary increase. I had been making plans to save aggressively over the next year with the goal of buying my own place, maybe a small townhouse closer to downtown, or even looking at properties outside the city where I could have more space. For once I was focused on building my future, rather than putting out someone else's fires. I had even started researching neighborhoods, creating spreadsheets of property values and calculating mortgage payments. This promotion wasn't just a job title, it was the first step toward a bigger life that I had designed for myself. A life where I made the decisions, set the priorities, and wasn't constantly at the mercy of family drama. Little did I know that all these plans would soon be accelerated in a way I never expected, sparked by a single family dinner that would push me past my breaking point. The Sunday dinner that changed everything started like any other. I parked my Subaru in my parents' driveway next to my dad's immaculately maintained Ford pickup. Their house was the same split level I had grown up in, painted a fresh shade of blue last summer, but otherwise unchanged since my childhood. The familiar smell of pot roast greeted me as I walked through the front door. "Braden, honey, is that you?" my mom called from the kitchen. "Yeah, Mom, it's me," I answered, hanging my jacket on the crowded coat rack by the door. The living room was, as it always had been, comfortable but dated. The same beige sofa, the same family photos arranged on the wall, the same ceramic figurines my mother had collected over decades. My father sat in his recliner watching a football game with the volume low. "How's work going, son?" he asked, not looking away from the screen. "Pretty good, actually. Just got a promotion last week." This finally pulled his attention from the game. "A promotion? Why didn't you tell us?" Before I could answer, my mother bustled in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "A promotion? That's wonderful news. We should celebrate." "It's not a big deal," I said, downplaying it automatically. Experience had taught me that my accomplishments often became ammunition for family comparisons. "Nonsense. My boy moving up in the world." Dad stood and gave me a hearty pat on the back. The conversation flowed pleasantly enough as we moved to the dining room. Mom's pot roast was served alongside mashed potatoes, green beans, and fresh rolls. We talked about Dad's golf game, Mom's book club, and neighborhood gossip. It felt almost normal, comfortable even. Then the front door opened, and Amber walked in without knocking. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, dropping her designer purse on an empty chair before leaning down to kiss our mother's cheek. She looked thinner than when I'd last seen her. Her blonde hair freshly highlighted her clothes, stylish but showing signs of wear if you looked closely enough. The diamond stud in her nose caught the light as she moved. "We were just celebrating Braden's promotion," Mom said, passing Amber a plate. "Cool. Congrats, bro." She didn't ask for details as she loaded her plate with food. "God, I'm starving. I've been so stressed I can barely eat lately." And just like that, the conversation shifted to Amber and her problems. Her second divorce had been finalized last month. Her ex had taken everything according to her, though I knew the apartment and car had been rented, not owned. She had been staying with a friend, but that arrangement was becoming toxic. I half-listened, nodding at appropriate intervals, while mentally calculating how much longer I needed to stay before I could politely leave. That's when the bomb dropped. "So we've been thinking," Mom said, looking between Dad and Amber, "about your living situation." "I told you I'm figuring it out," Amber said, pushing food around her plate. "We know, honey, but we have a solution." Mom reached over and patted Amber's hand before turning to me with an expectant smile. "Braden has that nice apartment with plenty of space." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew where this was going. "Your sister needs a place to stay just until she gets back on her feet," Dad said, as if explaining something simple to a child. "That apartment of yours is plenty big for 2 people. "It's a 1-bedroom, I said flatly. "You have that sofa thing right. The one that pulls out." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "And really, it's just temporary. 3 months, maybe 4 at most." I set my fork down carefully. "You're suggesting Amber move into my apartment?" Not suggesting, son, Dad said firmly. Your sister will move into your apartment next week. Family helps family. The statement hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Not a request, not a discussion, a declaration. I don't think that would work, I began carefully. My place is small, and I need my space for work. Maybe we could help Amber find an affordable place, or even chip in for the first month's rent somewhere. We already discussed it, Mom interrupted. This is the best solution. You didn't discuss it with me. I pointed out, feeling heat rise in my chest. Honestly, Braden, don't be so selfish, Amber chimed in, finally engaging in the conversation. It's not like I want to crash on your stupid sofa either, but I literally have nowhere else to go. What about a shelter, or a hostel, or literally anywhere else? The words slipped out before I could stop them. A shelter, Mom looked horrified. Your sister is not staying in some dangerous shelter when you have a perfectly good apartment. I've already started packing, Amber added casually. Dad's going to help me move my stuff next Saturday. They had planned this entire thing without even considering the need to consult me. The apartment that I paid for, that I had created as my sanctuary, was being commandeered without my consent. And they saw absolutely nothing wrong with this. I sat in stunned silence as they continued discussing the logistics, where Amber's vanity would fit, how she'd need space in the closet, how I should clear out the second bedroom. It's a one-bedroom, I repeated, but no one acknowledged me. You'll need to clean up a bit before she arrives, Mom said. You know how your sister is about cleanliness. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Amber, who had never cleaned a bathroom in her life, was apparently now concerned about cleanliness. Instead, I remained quiet, picking at my food while a storm brewed inside me. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I answered questions, robotically nodded at appropriate times, and declined dessert, claiming I had work to finish at home. As I drove away from my parents' house, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on me. They had decided my apartment was no longer mine. My space, my sanctuary, my one place of control in the world was being taken without my permission. And I was expected to not only accept this invasion, but be grateful for the opportunity to help family. By the time I reached my apartment, the numbness had given way to simmering anger. I stood in the middle of my living room looking at the space I had created for myself, and something inside me shifted. A lifetime of acquiescing, of keeping the peace, of putting my needs last cracked open, revealing a resolve I didn't know I possessed. No, I said aloud to the empty room. Not this time. That night I sat on my sofa until nearly 3 in the morning, staring at my apartment as if seeing it for the first time, the bookshelves I had built and mounted myself, the abstract painting I had splurged on from a local artist, the throw pillows in exactly the colors I wanted. Every object represented a small decision I had made for myself, a tiny piece of independence. My mind drifted to all the times my boundaries had been trampled by family. The Thanksgiving when Amber brought 3 unexpected friends to dinner, and I gave up my childhood bedroom to sleep on the couch. The time my parents borrowed my car for a week without asking because theirs was in the shop. The countless times my plans were expected to change because of family emergencies that somehow always centered around Amber. Each incident alone seemed minor, easily dismissed as normal family give and take. But strung together across years, they formed a pattern of disregard for my autonomy that had slowly corroded my sense of self. This apartment invasion was just the latest and most egregious example, and something inside me had finally had enough. I opened my laptop and pulled up my lease agreement, scanning through the dense legal language until I found what I was looking for. Section 8, Paragraph 3. Tenant may request transfer of lease to another qualifying individual subject to landlord approval. Transfer requests must be submitted in writing with application from proposed new tenant. I checked the time. 3:02 a.m. Too early to call my landlord, but not too early to send an email explaining my situation. I carefully composed a message, keeping it professional, despite the emotions churning inside me. I explained that I needed to move unexpectedly, and asked about the possibility of transferring my lease to another tenant. After sending the email, I started searching for available apartments in Seattle. The rental market was tight, but not impossible. I filtered for one-bedrooms in neighborhoods farther from my family's usual haunts. Ballard, Fremont, even considering across the water in West Seattle. The prices were higher than what I currently paid, but with my recent promotion I could manage the increase. I created a spreadsheet comparing options, noting distance from work amenities and availability dates. By the time dawn broke, I had a short list of 5 possible apartments and a plan forming. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, my phone rang. It was Maria, my landlord, responding to my email. "Braden, I got your message. Everything okay?" Her voice had the slight rasp of a former smoker. "Sort of a family situation," I said vaguely. "I need to relocate quickly and was hoping to transfer my lease rather than break it." You've been a good tenant, always on time with rent." She paused. "Got someone in mind for the transfer?" I hesitated. "Not yet, but I can find someone." "What's really going on, kid? You in some kind of trouble?" Something about her direct approach broke through my carefully maintained composure. Before I knew it, I was explaining the whole situation, my voice growing increasingly animated as I described my family's assumption that my sister would simply move into my space. Maria's laugh surprised me. "Oh, honey, I've been there. My brother-in-law tried to move into our garage apartment without asking once. Found him setting up his drums at 7 in the morning. "What did you do?" I asked. "Changed the locks and told my husband to handle his brother." She chuckled. "Look, I understand wanting your own space. Your lease transfer request is approved in principle. Find someone with decent credit and a steady job, and we'll make it happen." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Maria. I really appreciate this. Just do me a favor and stand up for yourself with your family. Trust me, it gets easier with practice." After hanging up, I called work and requested a personal day, claiming a family emergency, which wasn't entirely untrue. Then I booked viewings for 3 of the apartments on my shortlist. The first place was too close to downtown with noisy streets and minimal parking. The second had water damage poorly concealed by fresh paint. But the third, a corner unit on the 4th floor of a newer building in Fremont, felt right immediately. It was slightly smaller than my current place, but had better natural light, updated appliances, and a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. Most importantly, it was available immediately. I filled out the application on the spot, providing proof of income from my new position and references from Maria and my boss. The property manager seemed impressed by my credentials and promised to expedite the application process. Back at my apartment, I began the daunting task of assessing what I owned. 6 years in one place had allowed me to accumulate more than I realized. I created piles, keep, donate, sell trash. The process was simultaneously liberating and overwhelming. As I sorted through my possessions, my phone lit up with a text from Jackson, a colleague who had recently mentioned looking for a new place after his roommate announced plans to move in with his girlfriend. "Any leads on apartments near work? Rob moves out next week and I'm getting desperate." I stared at the message, a plan clicking into place. Jackson was reliable, had a good job, and we got along well. I called him immediately. "How would you feel about taking over my lease?" I asked, after explaining my situation. "Seriously, your place is awesome, but why are you moving?" I gave him the abbreviated version of my family drama. "That's messed up, man. But yeah, I'd definitely be interested in your apartment." We arranged for him to come by that evening to see the place and discuss details. When he arrived, he walked through the apartment with increasing enthusiasm. "This is perfect. The location, the space, everything. And you said the rent stays the same." I nodded. "Maria already approved the transfer in principle. She just needs your application and proof of income." "I can get that to her tomorrow," Jackson said, then hesitated. "But are you sure about this? It seems like you really love this place." "I do," I admitted. "But sometimes you have to make a change to keep what's really important." "Your sanity," he offered with a sympathetic smile. "Exactly. Over the next few days, everything fell into place with surprising speed. My application for the new apartment was approved. Jackson's application for my current apartment was accepted by Maria. I scheduled a moving truck for Saturday, the very day my parents planned to help Amber move in. I took the entire week off work, claiming a family emergency, requiring my full attention. In a way, it wasn't a lie. I packed methodically, labeling boxes with detailed contents, and began moving smaller items to the new apartment using my car. The new place gradually took shape. I assembled furniture, arranged books on shelves, and hung artwork on walls that had no history, no emotional baggage. Each item placed felt like a reclamation of control. Jackson began moving his things into my old apartment, excited about his new space. We coordinated carefully to ensure there would be no overlap with my family's planned arrival. On Friday night, I stood in my nearly empty old apartment. The furniture remained since Jackson had little of his own, but all personal items were gone. It looked like my apartment, but felt like a stage set, a place I had already left behind emotionally. "Keys are on the counter," I told Jackson as he brought in another box of his belongings. "Maria said she'll stop by tomorrow to finalize everything." "Thanks again, man. This is seriously saving me from having to move back in with my parents." The irony wasn't lost on me. Happy to help someone avoid that fate. Later that night, in my new apartment surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, I turned off my phone and slept more soundly than I had in weeks. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, but for tonight I had won back my independence. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, typical Seattle weather for early fall. I woke in my new apartment momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar shadows on the wall and the different sounds from the street below. The rental truck was scheduled for 9, giving me plenty of time to move the remaining furniture from my old apartment. I checked my phone for the first time since turning it off the night before. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and a text from Amber asking if I had cleaned the bathroom yet. None of them suspected what was about to happen. At 8:30, I pulled up to the rental facility in my car. The process was quick and efficient, and by 9:15 I was backing a medium-sized moving truck into the loading zone outside my old building. Jackson was already there, coffee in hand. "Morning, thought you could use this," he said, handing me a cup, and an extra set of hands. I hadn't expected his help, but was grateful for it. Together we began loading the few remaining pieces of furniture I had decided to keep: my desk, a bookshelf, and a side table that had belonged to my grandfather. The sofa bed and dining set were staying for Jackson to use. "Your family has no idea, right?" Jackson asked as we maneuvered the desk into the truck. "None. They're supposed to show up around 2 to help Amber move in. Man, I wish I could see their faces." He paused. "Actually, no, I don't. That sounds intensely uncomfortable. Hence why I won't be here," I said, securing the desk with a bungee cord. The loading went quickly with 2 of us working. By 11 we had finished, and I was doing a final walkthrough of my old apartment. It felt strange seeing the space that had been mine for 6 years now occupied by someone else's things. Jackson had already added his own touches: gaming posters on the wall, a collection of vinyl records next to the turntable I had left behind, different pillows on the sofa. "You sure you're okay leaving all this furniture?" he asked, gesturing around. "Yeah, I bought new stuff that fits the new place better," I lied. In truth, I had purchased only a new bed and sofa, spending more than I should have on short notice. The rest I would gradually replace, but it felt important to have a fresh start, unburdened by objects my family had seen and could associate with me. We shook hands at the door. "Good luck with your family," Jackson said. "And thanks again for the apartment. It's perfect." "Take good care of it," I replied, feeling a twinge of nostalgia despite everything. I handed over my keys, officially completing my part of the transfer. Maria had already processed the paperwork the day before, making Jackson the legal tenant. My name was no longer associated with the apartment in any way. Driving the rental truck across town to my new building felt surreal. Traffic was light for a Saturday, and I found myself at my new home sooner than expected. The property manager had arranged for me to have access to the freight elevator, making the unloading process relatively straightforward. The new apartment welcomed my few possessions, the spaces still feeling empty and full of potential. I took my time arranging each item, considering its placement carefully. This was my chance to create a space that was entirely mine, designed without compromise. By 1:30, I had returned the rental truck and was back at my new apartment, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. I checked my phone again, 2 more missed calls from Mom, and a text asking what time I would be home to help with Amber's things. I didn't respond. Let them discover the truth when they arrived. Setting up utilities had been handled days before. Internet was scheduled for installation on Monday. I had updated my address with the post office, my bank, and my employer. My existence at the old address had been systematically erased, replaced by Jackson's. As 2 o'clock approached, I found myself pacing, imagining the scene unfolding across town. Would they knock first? Or would Dad use the spare key I had given them for emergencies? Would they be confused to find a stranger in my apartment, or immediately angry? Would they call me demanding explanations, or would they first try to argue with Jackson about his right to be there? The anticipation was almost unbearable. I busied myself unpacking kitchen items, organizing them in cabinets that still smelled of fresh paint. The familiar routine of finding places for everyday objects helped ground me as the minutes ticked by. At exactly 2:17, my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Dad, this time. Again, I didn't answer. Then came the text messages rapid fire. Mom, where are you? We're at your apartment with Amber's things. Dad, call us immediately. Amber. What the hell, Braden? There's some guy living in your apartment. I set my phone down and continued unpacking. The calls continued for another 20 minutes before tapering off, replaced by increasingly frantic and angry texts. I imagined them standing in the hallway outside my old apartment, luggage and boxes piled around them, confronting a confused and uncomfortable Jackson. Part of me felt guilty for putting Jackson in that position, but he had assured me he could handle it. I'll just tell them the truth, he had said. The apartment was legally transferred to me. You no longer live here. I don't know your new address. By 4 o'clock, the tone of the messages had shifted from confusion to anger. Dad, this is completely irresponsible behavior. Call me now. Mom, how could you do this to your sister, to your family? Amber, you're such a selfish jerk. Where am I supposed to go now? I finally texted back a single message to the family group chat. I'm safe. I've moved. Amber cannot stay with me. Please respect my decision. Then I turned off notifications and continued setting up my new home. The bookshelves went against the wall opposite the windows. My desk faced the balcony, giving me a view of trees and sky while I worked. I ordered takeout from a nearby Thai restaurant I had never tried before, and ate it sitting on my new sofa, enjoying the quiet and the knowledge that no one could invade this space without my permission. That night, as I made up my new bed with fresh sheets, I felt a mixture of emotions: guilt for the abrupt way I had handled things, relief at having escaped the imposed roommate situation, and pride in finally standing up for myself. I slept fitfully, waking several times to the unfamiliar sounds of the new building, but each time I fell back asleep with the comforting knowledge that I was in control of my own space again. Sunday passed in a blur of unpacking and organizing. I ventured out only briefly to buy groceries and explore my new neighborhood. Fremont had a different energy than Capitol Hill, more relaxed and quirky. I discovered a coffee shop 2 blocks away with excellent pour-overs, and a bookstore with a surprisingly good technical section. These would become my new haunts, places where no one from my old life would think to look for me. My phone continued to light up with notifications which I glimpsed but didn't engage with. The family outrage was in full swing now, extending to aunts, uncles, and cousins who had apparently been enlisted to express their disappointment in my behavior. By Sunday evening, as I prepared for my return to work the next day, I finally felt settled enough to face the situation. I hadn't run away. I had made a deliberate choice to protect my boundaries. Now I needed to be prepared to defend that choice. Monday morning brought a semblance of normalcy as I returned to work. My colleagues knew I had moved, but not the dramatic circumstances surrounding it. I focused on coding, grateful for the logical problems that required my full attention and left no room for family drama. During lunch, I finally checked my messages. 37 missed calls and 64 texts spread across family members. The content ranged from concern to outrage to guilt-tripping. My mother had progressed from anger to worry, suggesting I might be having some kind of breakdown. My father's messages were shorter, emphasizing my responsibility to family. Amber's vacillated between rage and self-pity. Most surprising were the messages from extended family. Aunt Linda thought I was being selfish. Uncle Paul suggested I needed to man up and help your sister. Cousins I barely spoke to throughout the year suddenly had strong opinions about my living arrangements. The only exception was my mother's sister, Aunt Susan, who had sent a single text. "Call me when you're ready. I understand more than you might think." I responded to only one message telling my mother that I was fine, just busy with work, and would be in touch soon. This unleashed another flood of texts demanding immediate explanations, which I ignored. By mid-afternoon, a new complication arose. The receptionist called my desk. "Braden, there's a woman here insisting on seeing you. Says she's your mother." My stomach dropped. "I'm in the middle of something critical. Could you tell her I'll call her later?" "I tried that. She's saying it's a family emergency." Isaiah, "Give me 2 minutes." I quickly messaged my team lead explaining the situation, then headed to the lobby. My mother stood by the reception desk, her expression a mixture of worry and indignation. She looked smaller, somehow out of place among the modern furnishings and tech company atmosphere. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I kept my voice low. "You wouldn't answer your phone. What was I supposed to do?" Her voice carried, causing several heads to turn. "Let's talk outside," I suggested, guiding her toward the door. On the sidewalk outside my office building, she immediately launched into her grievances. "How could you just disappear like that? Do you have any idea how worried we've been? Your sister has nowhere to go. All her things are packed up and you just vanish without a word. I left my apartment because you all decided I would be sharing it without even asking me," I said calmly. "And I did send a message saying I was safe. One message. After disappearing. And what about Amber? Where is she supposed to go now?" "That's not my responsibility, Mom. It never was." Her face crumpled. "I don't even recognize you anymore. This isn't how we raised you." "No, you raised me to always put everyone else first, especially Amber. I'm done with that." A couple walking by glanced at us curiously, and I realized we were creating a scene. "I need to get back to work. We can talk about this later, at a more appropriate time and place." "Your sister is sleeping on our couch because of you," she said, her voice breaking. "At least tell us where you're living now." "I'm not ready to share that information yet." The hurt in her eyes was difficult to witness, but I held firm. "I'll call you this weekend, I promise." I returned to my desk, feeling shaken but resolute. An email from my team lead was waiting. "Everything okay? Take the rest of the day if you need it." I considered the offer but decided staying busy would be better than sitting alone with my thoughts. I threw myself back into work coding until my eyes burned and the office had emptied around me. That evening, I returned to my new apartment to find a letter taped to my door. My heart raced until I realized it was just a welcome note from the property management company. Of course, my family couldn't have found me already. I had been careful not to leave any trail. Still, the incident with my mother at work had left me unsettled. I decided to be proactive and emailed my boss the next morning, briefly explaining that I was dealing with a family situation that might result in unexpected visitors. She was understanding and assured me that security would be instructed not to allow anyone up to our floor without proper clearance. The week progressed with similar patterns. Work provided escape during the day. Evenings were spent alternating between setting up my new apartment and fielding increasingly manipulative messages from family. My father tried appealing to my sense of duty. My mother escalated her concerns about my mental health. Amber veered between vicious attacks and tearful pleas. By Thursday, a new narrative had emerged in the family communications. According to several cousins, I had abandoned Amber when she needed me most. The story had been twisted to make me the villain, my actions portrayed as a sudden, inexplicable betrayal, rather than a response to years of boundary violations. Even more frustrating was learning that my parents had known for months that Amber would need a place to stay. Her latest divorce had been finalized in July, and she had been couch surfing since then. They had approached several other relatives before me, all of whom had declined to house her. I was the last resort, not the first choice selected, because they assumed I would be the easiest to manipulate. This information came from Jackson, who had endured an uncomfortable confrontation with my family on moving day. "Your dad tried to argue that the lease transfer couldn't be legal," he texted. "Your mom kept saying there must be some mistake. Your sister just sat on the stairwell crying dramatically. It was intense." "Sorry you had to deal with that," I replied. "No worries, but thought you should know they tried coming back on Sunday too." I didn't answer the door. I was grateful for Jackson's discretion and made a mental note to invite him for dinner once things settled down. The weekend approached, and with it the promise I had made to call my parents. I dreaded the conversation, but knew avoiding it would only escalate the situation further. I spent Friday evening rehearsing what I would say, trying to anticipate their arguments and prepare my responses. Saturday morning I called my father first, assuming he would be the more rational of my parents. "So you're finally ready to talk?" he answered, his voice gruff. "Yes, Dad. I think we need to clear the air." "Clear the air? You disappeared without a word, left your sister homeless, and you think a phone call will clear the air?" I took a deep breath. "I left because you and Mom made a unilateral decision about my living space without consulting me. That wasn't right. Family helps family, Braden. That's how it works. Help is something freely given, not demanded or assumed. So you're saying you won't help your sister, after everything we've done for you?" And there it was, the familiar guilt trip that had controlled me for years. "I'm saying I get to decide how and when I help, just like everyone else in the family seems to do. Uncle Rick didn't take Amber in, neither did Aunt Linda or any of the cousins. Why was it only expected of me?" The silence on the other end told me I had struck a nerve. "That's different," he finally said. "They have kids' limited space. I had a one-bedroom apartment, Dad. Where exactly did you think Amber would sleep? And for how long? It would have been temporary. Like the last 3 times were temporary. Amber hasn't held a job for more than a few months in years. She has no savings, no plan. Temporary would have become permanent, and you know it." The conversation continued in circles, my father unable or unwilling to see my perspective. Eventually, he handed the phone to my mother, who immediately began crying. "We just don't understand what's happened to you," she sobbed. "You were always such a good boy, so helpful." "I'm still me, Mom. I'm just setting boundaries now." "Boundaries? We're your family, not some strangers you need protection from. Everyone needs boundaries, even with family. Especially with family." The call ended with nothing resolved. My parents still believed I was being selfish and unreasonable. I still believed I had made the right decision to protect my independence. The gulf between these perspectives seemed unbridgeable. As I set my phone down, I noticed a text from Aunt Susan. "Still here when you're ready to talk." I hesitated, then called her number. "Well, it's about time," she answered warmly. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about your favorite aunt." Despite everything, I found myself smiling. "Been a little busy lately." "So, I've heard. The family grapevine is buzzing with tales of your great betrayal." Her tone was wry, suggesting she didn't buy into the narrative. "And what do you think?" I asked cautiously. "I think you finally stood up for yourself, and certain people don't quite know how to handle that." Relief washed over me at her understanding. We talked for nearly an hour, Susan sharing her own experiences with family boundary issues and offering perspective I hadn't considered. "Your parents aren't bad people," she said gently. "They just never learned to see you as separate from their expectations. And Amber, well, she's been enabled her whole life. Neither of them knows any other way to be. So what do I do now? Give it time. Stand your ground. Eventually they'll have to accept the new reality, or risk losing you entirely. And Braden, I'm proud of you for valuing yourself enough to make this change. After hanging up, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. One person in my family understood, and that was enough for now. 2 weeks after my disappearing act, I finally agreed to meet with my family. The continuous calls, texts, and now emails had worn me down, and I recognized that a face-to-face conversation was necessary if we were ever to move forward. I suggested a coffee shop in a neutral neighborhood, far from both my new apartment and my parents' home. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner that offered some privacy while still being in a public space. The familiar smell of espresso and pastries did little to calm my nerves. My parents arrived first, looking tired and tense. My mother attempted to hug me, but I stepped back, offering a smile instead. My father gave a curt nod, his disapproval evident in the set of his jaw. Amber trailed behind them, sunglasses perched on her head, phone in hand, looking simultaneously bored and aggrieved. "Thank you for coming," I said as they settled into their seats. "We wouldn't have to meet like this if you had just answered your phone properly," my father replied. "Not the most promising start." "I needed some space to think," I said evenly. "A lot happened very quickly." "You're telling me," Amber interjected. "One minute I'm getting ready to move, the next I find out my brother has ghosted his own family." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. I didn't ghost anyone. I moved because my boundaries weren't being respected. Boundaries? My mother looked genuinely confused. What boundaries? The basic right to decide who lives in my home, for starters. It was just temporary, my father insisted, until Amber got back on her feet. "You decided that without asking me. You announced it as a fact, not a request. That's not okay." "So, you just disappeared." Amber's voice rose. "Do you have any idea what you put us through? Mom's been worried sick." "I told you I was safe." After disappearing without a trace, my mother's eyes welled with tears. "We thought something terrible had happened." "Something terrible was happening," I said quietly. "My family was treating me like I had no right to make decisions about my own life." "That's ridiculous," my father scoffed. "We were trying to help your sister. Family helps family. Except when it comes to respecting my needs, apparently." The conversation quickly deteriorated, with accusations flying from both sides. My parents couldn't understand why I wouldn't simply accommodate Amber. I couldn't understand why they couldn't see how unreasonable their expectations had been. "You've always been selfish," Amber said bitterly, "always hoarding your precious space and time while the rest of us deal with real problems." Something snapped inside me. Years of suppressed frustration and resentment came pouring out. Real problems. Like the ones you create for yourself over and over. "I've been cleaning up your messes for years, Amber. Lending you money you never repay. Giving you rides when you're stranded. Making excuses to bosses when you don't show up for jobs I helped you get. And none of it has ever been enough." My parents looked shocked at my outburst. "Every time I try to establish any kind of boundary, I'm called selfish," I continued. "Every time I prioritize my needs, I'm made to feel guilty. I'm done with that. I deserve to have my own life, my own space, my own decisions respected." "We just wanted to help your sister," my mother said weakly. "By volunteering my home without asking me, that's not help, that's control." "You could have just said no," my father argued. "Would you have listened? When have you ever accepted no from me when it conflicts with what you want?" The silence that followed was telling. "Did you know," I said, looking directly at my parents, "that you asked me to take Amber in after everyone else refused? Uncle Rick said no. Aunt Linda said no. Even Cousin Peter with his 3-bedroom house said no. But they're not selfish, right? Only I am, for wanting the same right to choose." My mother looked away, uncomfortable with this truth being stated so plainly. "They have families," she murmured. "And I don't. My life, my space, my peace doesn't count as important." Unexpectedly, Amber burst into tears, not the manipulative sobbing I had seen so many times before, but genuine body-shaking sobs. "You think I wanted this?" she choked out. "You think I enjoy having nowhere to go, having to beg for a place to stay? Do you know how humiliating this is?" For the first time, I glimpsed the real pain behind my sister's entitlement. Not that it excused her behavior, but it helped me understand it a little better. "I know this is hard for you," I said, my voice softening slightly. "But it's not my responsibility to fix your situation, especially not at the cost of my own well-being." "So what am I supposed to do?" she asked, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "The same thing other adults do. Get a stable job, live within your means, make a plan, and stick to it." "It's not that simple," she protested. "It is that simple, just not easy." My father, who had been quietly seething, finally spoke. "So you're just abandoning your sister when she needs you most? Is that the kind of man we raised?" I felt my temper flare again. "You raised me to believe my needs don't matter as long as someone else's seem more urgent. That's not healthy, Dad. That's not what I want for my life anymore." "So, where does that leave us?" my mother asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Are you cutting us out of your life completely?" "No," I said after a moment, "but things need to change. I need you to respect my decisions even when you don't agree with them. I need you to ask, not tell, and I need you to accept that sometimes I will say no." "And your sister? What about her?" I looked at Amber, who was wiping her eyes with a napkin. "I care about you, Amber, but I can't keep enabling behaviors that hurt us both. I'll help you find resources, make a plan, but I won't be your safety net anymore." She nodded slightly, not meeting my eyes. The conversation continued for another hour, circling through the same points, without much resolution. My parents struggled to understand my perspective, trapped in their traditional view of family obligation. Amber vacillated between anger and vulnerability. I maintained my position as calmly as I could, though my patience was wearing thin. Finally, when it became clear we were just repeating ourselves, I stood up. "I need to go. We can talk again in a few weeks after everyone's had time to process." "You still haven't told us where you're living now," my mother pointed out. "No, I haven't, and I'm not going to, not yet." "So you don't trust us?" My father looked wounded. "I need to know my boundaries will be respected before I share that information." This led to another round of protests and accusations, which I finally cut short by simply walking out of the coffee shop. The guilt was immediate and intense, but so was the sense of liberation. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had clearly articulated my needs and stood firm despite the emotional pressure. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Susan. "How did it go?" "About as well as expected," I replied, which is to say, not very well at all. "First steps are always the hardest. Come for dinner next week, I make a mean lasagna." I smiled at my phone. "I'd like that." Driving back to my new apartment, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: guilt for hurting my family pride, for standing my ground, grief for the relationship I wished we had, and hope that maybe eventually we could build something healthier. For now, though, I had done what I needed to do. I had chosen myself perhaps for the first time, and despite the pain and conflict, I couldn't bring myself to regret that choice. 6 months after the dramatic family confrontation, I stood on the small balcony of my Fremont apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The neighborhood had become home in ways I hadn't anticipated. I knew the baristas at the corner coffee shop by name. The owner of the local bookstore saved programming books he thought might interest me. I had even joined a community garden 2 blocks away where my tomato plants were finally starting to flourish. My apartment had evolved from a hasty refuge to a true sanctuary. The walls, once bare, now displayed art I had carefully selected. The furniture, initially sparse, had been supplemented with pieces that reflected my taste rather than practical necessity. Plants thrived on windowsills, adding life and color to every room. Most importantly, this space was undeniably mine. No one entered without invitation. No one made demands on it or me. The boundaries I had established remained firm, protecting the peace I had fought so hard to create. My relationship with my family had undergone its own transformation, painful but necessary. For the first month after our coffee shop, confrontation communication had been minimal and strained. My parents sent occasional texts, checking in their tone, alternating between concern and lingering resentment. Amber remained mostly silent, processing her own issues in whatever way she could. The turning point came surprisingly through my father. One evening I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Braden, it's Dad. My phone died using a friend's." His voice sounded different, lacking the authoritative tone I was accustomed to. "Is everything okay?" I asked cautiously. "Not really." He paused. "Your mother and I have been talking. A lot. About you. About how we've treated you over the years." I waited, unsure where this was heading. "I keep thinking about what you said about us never accepting no from you, and you were right. We didn't respect your boundaries. I didn't respect them." The admission stunned me into silence. "I'm not saying we did everything wrong," he continued, "but we could have done better. Should have done better, especially with that apartment situation. Thank you for saying that I managed. Would you be willing to come for dinner next Sunday? Just to talk. No ambushes, no Amber, no expectations. Just talk." That dinner had been awkward but productive. My mother cried, apologizing for making me feel unimportant. My father, less comfortable with emotional discussions, expressed similar sentiments in his own way. I shared more about my frustrations and hopes for our relationship going forward. We agreed to start fresh with new understanding and respect. Progress wasn't linear. There were still misunderstandings, still moments when old patterns emerged. But each time we found our way back to the new foundation, we were building one conversation at a time. Amber's journey was more complicated. After bouncing between friends' couches for several weeks, she finally accepted our parents' offer to move back home with conditions. She had to get a job and contribute to household expenses. She had to attend therapy to address her dependency issues, and she had to develop a concrete plan for independence. To everyone's surprise, including her own, she rose to these challenges. She found work as an administrative assistant at a local community college, a position that suited her social nature while providing structure she desperately needed. Her therapist helped her recognize patterns of entitlement and avoidance that had sabotaged her previous attempts at stability. 3 months ago, she had moved into a small studio apartment of her own, her first truly independent living situation since her first marriage 8 years ago. We had begun rebuilding our relationship, cautiously meeting for occasional coffees or walks. The entitlement that had characterized our interactions for years had diminished, replaced by a tentative mutual respect. "I never really saw you before," she admitted during one of our walks. "You were just there, reliable, available whenever I needed something." "And now?" I asked. She shrugged. "Now you're a person, with your own life, your own problems. It's weird, but better." Not everyone in the family understood or accepted the changes in our dynamics. Some relatives still viewed my actions as selfish, my boundaries as unnecessary. Uncle Paul made passive-aggressive comments at family gatherings. Cousin Jessica openly questioned why I couldn't have just helped out for a few months. But others, like Aunt Susan, became unexpected allies. During a particularly tense Easter dinner, when Uncle Paul suggested I had abandoned my sister, Susan intervened. Actually, Paul Braden taught his sister something valuable about independence and responsibility, something we could all learn from. The support from unexpected corners helped reinforce that I wasn't crazy for wanting basic respect. And as time passed, even the critics began to see the positive changes in Amber, changes that might never have occurred if I had continued enabling her dependency. My own personal growth extended beyond family relationships. Standing up for myself that first time had unlocked something vital within me. I began advocating for myself at work, resulting in better project assignments, and eventually another promotion. I developed deeper friendships built on mutual respect rather than convenience or obligation. I even started dating again now, able to recognize and avoid people who didn't respect boundaries. Jackson and I remained friends, occasionally meeting for beers or gaming sessions. He had made my old apartment truly his own, painting walls and replacing the furniture I had left behind. Sometimes it was strange to visit, seeing the familiar space transformed, but mostly it felt right, a physical reminder of how much had changed. As the sunset faded to twilight, I reflected on the lessons of the past 6 months. I had learned that true family supports your growth, not just your compliance. That saying no is sometimes the most self-loving thing you can do. That boundaries aren't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. And perhaps most importantly, that it's never too late to change destructive patterns, no matter how deeply ingrained they may be. The healing wasn't complete and might never be entirely. Some wounds left scars that would always be visible if you knew where to look. But the pain had transformed into something constructive, a foundation for a better life built on self-respect and authentic connection. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Still on for brunch tomorrow. Dad's excited to show you his new woodworking project." I smiled as I typed my response, looking forward to it. The journey from that Sunday dinner announcement to this moment had been difficult, painful, and ultimately transformative. By refusing to sacrifice my needs for others' demands, I had not only reclaimed my independence, but helped create healthier relationships for everyone involved. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for others is to stand firm in your own worth. And sometimes the only way forward is to walk away even from those you love until they can see you clearly for who you truly are. If you've ever had to make the difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself, let me know in the comments below. Has setting boundaries with family changed your relationships for better or worse? Share your experiences and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most important growth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your needs matter too.